Oh, you ever have one of those nights where the rain just feels heavy? I don't mean just wet, I mean heavy, like the sky is trying to push the roof down on top of you, and the wind is howling through the pines like a wounded animal. That was exactly the kind of Tuesday night I was having at my clinic just outside of Forks, Washington. I've been a vet for 30 years, seen everything from bears with toothaches to house cats that thought they were tigers, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what came stumbling out of the darkness that night. My name's Elias, by the way, and I run a small emergency vet practice off the old logging road. It's usually quiet, just me and my assistant Sarah, who's this tough-as-nails ex-army medic who loves animals more than people, and frankly, I don't blame her. We were just about to lock up, the lights were flickering because the storm was messing with the grid, when we heard it, not a knock, but a thud, a heavy, desperate impact against the back metal door. Sarah looked at me, her hand instinctively going to the heavy flashlight she keeps under the counter, and I nodded, grabbing the keys, thinking maybe it was a deer hit by a car or some lost hiker, but when I swung that door open, my heart just about stopped. Lying there in the mud, shivering so hard it looked like she was vibrating, was a Belgian Malinois, but she didn't look like any dog I'd ever seen. She was built like a tank but starved to the bone, her ribs were cutting through her wet fur like knives, and her eyes, man, those eyes, they weren't just brown or amber, they were this piercing, electric gold that seemed to look right through my soul. She didn't growl, didn't snap, she just looked at me with this terrifying intelligence and collapsed, and that's when I saw the swollen belly. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant, and she was in trouble. "Get the stretcher, Sarah, now!" I yelled, the wind tearing the words out of my mouth, and we hauled her inside. She must have weighed 80 pounds even being that skinny, just pure muscle and density, and the moment we got her onto the stainless steel table, the smell hit us, not just wet dog, but something metallic, chemical, like ozone and copper. She was burning up, fever of 106, which should have killed her, but she was conscious, watching us, calculating, and I put my stethoscope to her chest and frowned because her heart rate was slow, way too slow for a dog in distress. It was beating like a sledgehammer, steady, rhythmic, almost mechanical. "Doc, look at her scars," Sarah whispered, pointing to these faint, silvery lines running along her spine and the base of her skull, surgical precision, healed but clearly not from any routine surgery. These were incision marks from something complex, something invasive. I didn't have time to dwell on it because her water broke right then and there, but the fluid wasn't clear, it was slightly bioluminescent, glowing a faint, eerie blue under the exam lights, and Sarah and I just locked eyes, that silent communication of, what in God's name is happening, but the instinct to save a life took over. "She's crowning," I said, snapping on fresh gloves, telling the dog. We started calling her Valkyrie right then because she looked like she'd fallen from a battlefield, that she was safe. "It's okay, Val, we got you," and she let out this low, guttural sound that wasn't a whine, it sounded like a harmonic hum, vibrating the metal table beneath her. Then the first pup came out, and usually, this is the moment of relief, the miracle of life and all that, but when I caught that slippery little bundle in the towel, the room went ice-cold silent. It didn't cry. Puppies squeal, they gasp, they wiggle, but this thing was perfectly still, not dead, just waiting. I wiped the membrane off its face and I swear my hand started shaking, because it didn't look like a dog. I mean, it had 4 legs and a tail, but the fur was like velvet, sleek and water-repellent, charcoal black, and its paws were webbed, fully webbed, with distinct, retractable claws that looked more like obsidian glass than keratin. And the face, it was flat, streamlined, with ears that were sealed shut against the head, and when it finally opened its eyes, they weren't the milky blue of a newborn, they were sharp, focused, and glowing that same radioactive blue as the fluid. "Doc." Sarah's voice trembled, and she doesn't tremble for anything. "What is that?" "I don't know," I whispered, checking the vitals, and get this, the thing had a resting heart rate of 40 beats per minute for a newborn. That's impossible, that's reptilian, but it was warm, it was alive. Val pushed out 4 more, all identical, all silent, moving in this creepy, synchronized way, piling on top of each other not just for warmth but like they were forming a tactical unit. And Val, she didn't lick them frantically like a normal mother, she just nudged them with her nose, checking them, counting them, looking at us with that defiant, protective glare that said, if you touch. We were bouncing down this old fire trail, mud flying everywhere, the suspension of my Bronco screaming for mercy, and Sarah is in the passenger seat navigating with a topographic map because we ditched our phones miles back. They can track those, you know, people forget that, but in the army, that's the first thing you learn. The drone was still buzzing somewhere above us, but the heavy canopy of the spruce trees was giving us some cover, masking our heat signature just enough to keep us a moving target rather than a sitting duck. They're gaining, Doc, Sarah said, her voice tight. Watching the side mirror, I can see the headlights cutting through the switchbacks. I know, I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. We need to get to the gorge, the bridge there is washed out for cars, but if we're careful, we can cross on foot. They can't follow in the SUVs. But Val, she started getting restless in the back, pacing back and forth on the seat, whining, but it wasn't a whine of fear, it was communication. She was looking out the back window, her ears twitching, tracking something I couldn't hear. Suddenly, she barked, a sharp, deafening command, and launched herself into the front seat, shoving her head between me and the steering wheel, grabbing my sleeve and yanking hard to the right. Hey! Val, down! I shouted, fighting her, but she wouldn't let go. She was practically dragging the wheel, and out of pure instinct, I jerked the truck to the right, swerving off the trail into a thicket of ferns just as a tree, a massive, 100-year-old pine, came crashing down exactly where we would have been. A lightning strike or wind, I don't know, but it shattered the road, sending dirt and splinters exploding where my hood had been seconds ago. I slammed on the brakes, breathing hard. The truck stalled in the brush. Silence. Total silence except for the rain. She knew, Sarah whispered, staring at the fallen tree. She heard the wood cracking before it fell. I looked at Val. She wasn't panting. She was just sitting there, calm, looking at me like, are you paying attention now? This wasn't just heightened senses, this was predictive processing, combat intuition engineered into a biological form. We have to move, I said, grabbing the duffel bag. Truck's dead, we walk from here. We bailed out into the storm, Sarah carrying the med kit, me carrying the basket of silent, glowing-eyed pups, and Val taking point. She didn't need a leash, she was on a mission. We hiked for an hour, the mud sucking at our boots, the cold seeping into our bones, until we reached the rushing roar of the Sol Duc River. The bridge was gone, just twisted rebar and concrete jutting out over the whitewater rapids, but there was a fallen log, slick with moss, bridging the gap. We cross here, I said, but before we could take a step, a voice cut through the storm, amplified by a loudspeaker. Dr. Thorne. Stop right there. I froze. Emerging from the tree line behind us, maybe 50 yards back, was a man in a pristine gray tactical suit, flanked by 4 armed operatives. He didn't look like a government agent, he looked like a CEO, slicked back hair, calm face, holding an umbrella like he was waiting for a taxi, not hunting mutants in the woods. I'm Director Sterling, he called out, stepping closer, and you are in possession of proprietary technology belonging to Aegis Dynamics. Hand over the asset and the prototypes, and you walk away, Elias. You can go back to fixing cats and dogs. No harm, no foul. Val stood between me and him, her hackles raised, and for the first time, I saw what she really was. Her jaw unhinged slightly, wider than a dog's should, revealing a second row of teeth, and the fur along her spine stood up and rippled, changing color to match the dark greens of the forest, active camouflage. She was growling, but it was that low-frequency hum again, and I saw the operatives flinch, clutching their headsets like the sound was hurting their ears. They're living beings. I shouted back over the roar of the river, not iPhones you can just recall because of a glitch. Sterling sighed, looking disappointed. They are biological hardware, Doctor, designed for search and rescue in hazardous environments, radiation zones, deep sea. They are immune to pain, immune to fear. Now, give me the control unit. He meant the mother. He wanted Val. She's not hardware, I muttered, looking at Sarah. Get across the log. Take the pups. Doc. Go. I shoved the basket into her arms. Sarah hesitated, then sprinted for the log, balancing precariously over the deadly water. Sterling snapped his fingers. Secure the asset. The operatives raised their rifles. Val didn't wait. She didn't attack them, she attacked the ground. She slammed her front paws into the mud bank, channeling that vibration, and the unstable earth beneath the operatives, already soaked by rain, gave way. It was a localized landslide, engineered by sound. The ground crumbled, sending two of the men sliding down into the ravine with shouts of surprise. In the chaos, I scrambled onto the log, Val right on my heels. We were halfway across when Sterling, looking furious now, pulled a pistol, not a tranquilizer, a real gun, and aimed at Val. No! I yelled, turning back. Bang! The shot rang out, echoing off the canyon walls. Val yelped, a high-pitched sound that broke my heart, and stumbled, her back leg giving out. She slid off the log, scrabbling for purchase, her claws sparking against the stone. Val! I lunged, grabbing her scruff just as she went over the edge. I was lying flat on the wet wood, holding 80 pounds of muscle and genetic engineering by a handful of fur, the river raging 20 feet below. Her golden eyes locked onto mine, pain swimming in them, but also calculation. She looked at Sarah, who was safe on the other side with the pups, then she looked at me, and I swear she smiled, a dog smile, but a sad one. I grabbed the ultrasound wand, thinking maybe there was one more, or maybe I needed to check her internal bleeding, and as I scanned her neck, the screen glitched, static rolling across the monitor, and then I saw it, a dense, rectangular shadow embedded right next to her jugular. It wasn't a standard microchip, it was huge, powered, pulsing with a signal strong enough to interfere with my equipment. Sarah, hand me the scalpel, I said, my gut twisting because I just knew, this wasn't a stray, this was property, and whoever owned her was probably looking for her. I made a tiny incision, Val didn't even flinch, she just watched me, and I popped out this silver casing, no bigger than a SIM card, engraved with a symbol I'd never seen, a hawk gripping a double helix, and a serial number, Apex 09 Gen 4. I dropped it into a metal kidney dish and the moment it hit the pan, the phone on the wall rang. Now, you have to understand, it's 2 a.m., in a storm, the lines are mostly down, and nobody calls the landline anymore, so when that shrill ring cut through the silence, it felt like a gunshot. Sarah looked at the phone, then at me, and I just shook my head, don't answer it, but the answering machine clicked on, and a voice filled the room, synthetic, calm, and terrifyingly polite. Dr. Elias Thorne, we are detecting a bioasset signal originating from your location, do not attempt to interact with the asset, a retrieval team is 3 minutes out, compliance is mandatory for your safety. The line went dead, and for a second, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof and those strange, rhythmic breaths from the pups. 3 minutes. They knew who I was, they knew exactly where we were, and they weren't asking. Sarah, lock the front door, I said, my voice dropping to that command tone I hadn't used since my days in the Marines, turn off the main lights, get the truck around back. You're not giving them up, she asked, already moving, grabbing the box of supplies. Look at them, Sarah, I pointed to the table, where Val was now standing, shaky but upright, her body shielding those strange, alien babies. You think the people who made these things want to give them belly rubs? They're lab rats to them, failed experiments. If they take them back, they're going to dissect them to figure out why they worked or why they ran. I wasn't about to let that happen, not on my watch, not in my clinic. I grabbed a bundle of blankets and scooped up the pups. They were heavy, dense as lead, and Val let out this low, warning rumble that vibrated in my chest, but I looked her right in those gold eyes and said, we're leaving, girl, we're going, and I swear she understood. She hopped off that table, stumbling, bleeding, but moving with a grace that was terrifying. We hit the back door just as the headlights swept across the front windows, blinding white beams cutting through the rain, tires screeching on the gravel. I peeked through the blinds and saw them, 3 black SUVs, unmarked, military grade, and men piling out in slick raincoats holding things that definitely weren't animal control catchpoles. They were holding tranquilizer rifles with laser sights. "Go, go, go," I hissed, pushing Val into the back seat of my beat-up Ford Bronco. Sarah jumped in the passenger side, and I cranked the engine, praying the old girl would start in the cold. She sputtered once, twice, and roared to life just as the front door of my clinic was kicked in, literally kicked off the hinges. I didn't turn on the headlights. I threw it in reverse and spun out into the mud, fishtailing toward the logging trail that leads up into the Olympic Mountains. I knew these woods better than anyone. I knew the trails the map didn't show, and I knew that if we stayed on the main road, we were dead. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see darkness, but instead, I saw the red flare of taillights turning to follow us, and then, something else, a drone, rising up above the tree line, its thermal camera glowing like a calm, unblinking eye. Val was in the back, licking the pups, calm as a statue, and I realized then that we hadn't just rescued a dog, we had stolen a multi-million-dollar weapon, and the owners wanted their inventory back. She knew I couldn't pull her up. She knew Sterling was lining up a second shot. She stopped struggling. She went limp. "Don't you do it," I gritted out, tears mixing with the rain on my face. "Don't you dare." She licked my hand, one rough, warm swipe, and then she twisted her body and bit my wrist, not hard, just enough to make me flinch and let go. She fell. She hit the water with a splash that was instantly swallowed by the rapids, and she was gone, swept away into the darkness and the foam. "Fire!" Sterling shouted, and bullets chipped the wood next to my head. I scrambled across the rest of the log, dragging myself onto the far bank. Sarah grabbed me and pulled me into the dense brush, and we ran. We ran until our lungs burned, until the sun started to bleed gray light through the trees, until we were sure they weren't following. We found a cave system I knew about, miles deep in the national park, and we collapsed. I thought we had lost her. I thought the story ended there, with me failing the most magnificent creature I'd ever met. But here's the thing about nature, it adapts. We laid low for weeks, feeding those strange, silent pups with powdered milk and raw fish from the stream. They grew fast, too fast. Within a month, they were the size of beagles, their scales hardening, their camouflage shifting with their mood. We knew we couldn't keep them, and we couldn't go back to the clinic. I decided to report it. I went to a payphone 3 towns over and called a journalist friend, gave him the story, but sanitized it. I told him a military transport crashed, animals died. I wanted Aegis Dynamics to think they had won, that the assets were destroyed in the river. It worked. The heat died down. Sterling probably wrote it off as a loss on his quarterly report. But 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of a cabin I rented under a fake name, watching the tree line. Sarah had taken the pups, now nearly full-grown, to a sanctuary deep in the Yukon, a place where no one goes, where they could be the apex predators they were designed to be, but free. I was alone, drinking coffee, thinking about that night, about the choice Val made to save her kids. I heard a twig snap. I didn't reach for a gun. I just set my cup down. Out of the shadows, limping slightly, dragging a back leg that had healed crooked but strong, walked a Belgian Malinois. Her fur was matted, scars crisscrossed her flank, and she looked thinner, wilder. But those eyes, those electric gold eyes, were unmistakable. She stopped at the edge of the clearing. She didn't come to me for a pet. She didn't wag her tail. She just stood there, acknowledging me, letting me know she survived, that she beat the water, the bullet, and the cold. She looked at me for a long minute, a look of mutual respect between two old soldiers, and then she turned her head toward the north, toward the Yukon, and let out that low, harmonic hum. It wasn't a growl. It was a goodbye. She melted back into the forest, not like a dog walking away, but like a ghost fading into the mist. I never saw her again, but sometimes, when the wind blows from the north, I hear it, not a howl, but a vibration in the air, a song of something that refuses to be owned, refuses to be broken. And I sit there and smile, because I know somewhere out there, the Project Apex prototype isn't a weapon. She's a mother. And God help anyone who tries to hurt her family again.